Another example, I'd heard the head of your Social Security department tell how we had certain pensions, and you had the pensions be in addition to Social Security, which meant the employers wanted to improve Social Security because the workers. You want to elaborate how that strategy developed and how it worked out? I think it was a tremendous
it was
strategy.
1950. I was involved in the Chrysler strike. It's 104 days, and the only issue was funded pensions. We were asking for $100 a month, including Social Security. Yeah. The corporation was offering $100 a month, including Social Security. Yeah. But the issue that divided us, reminds me of the baseball strike, was issue of principle. They're the most difficult issues to solve. Chrysler argued for, almost the whole, about 95 of those 104 days. They'd never missed a payroll. They would pay pensions out of the general revenues of the company. We, of course, and thank goodness we did it, we said, no, we want it guaranteed. We want a funded pension. And based upon subsequent events, I'm glad we made that fight. But it's a very difficult one because it was a difficult one to understand. I was there in all those negotiations. Those 104 days. And we're talking about an actuarially sound pension plan. I didn't even know what it meant when we started negotiating. But what it means is, guaranteed.
I'd like to go into that a little more. That I was about as close to Gus Scholl as you were to Walter Reuther. And when that came about, Gus and I said, how are you going to get people out on strike for the term funded? Mm-hmm. He and I weren't, look, nobody knew what it meant. How did you do that educational job to get people to understand it? And as you said, the way Chrysler went, you're very glad you had it funded.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a little story in connection with that. The strike had to be, 60, 70 days old, and it was winter, and we had a rally of the old Plymouth Local 51. And a strike would be at least 70 days. And we're all bundled up outside, and Walter Reuther was giving the speech, and he says the company made the first significant move. They've agreed to set aside $90 million in sort of a reserve fund. It wasn't a funded fund. It says it's a step in the right direction. And some worker in the bank says, yes, Walter, but it's actuarially sound. So eventually, the workers understood it. But still, I don't want to diminish the difficulty. But then what happened later on, at the point we integrated $100 a month, including Social Security, then for the very first time, the companies went to Congress and tried to increase the Social Security benefits because they'd have to pay less. Yeah. And after they did that, we separated them again in subsequent negotiations.
Yeah. So that I think that was a tremendous accomplishment.
Yeah, I tell Todd, the other recollection I had, we didn't negotiate on company property. We refused to because it was bitter.
Sure.
We thought that we were involved in an unnecessary strike, that the corporation shouldn't have taken a strike on this issue. And we're negotiating the old Wardell Sheraton Hotel on Woodward and Kirby.
Yeah.
And so then the inevitable day comes, we make a settlement, and you're supposed to go down and shake hands with the company for, a photo opportunity. Yeah. And just before was a room they set aside for that, and all the photographers were there. There's no TV, as I recall. Maybe there was, but in the early days, but a lot of cameras. Before we went in, Walter said, look, he said, I don't think we should engage in this, these normal, traditional handshakes. He says, they had no right putting us through this. And why don't we just show our disdain and our anger by refusing to shake hands? So that's what we did. Now, some people might think, well, that's petty, but it made us feel good, I can tell you.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is that when you look back at those things that are accepted now, that you and I remember, unemployment comp was rocking chair money. Anyone who wanted a nickel an hour raise was a communist. And, certainly, there has been some progress.
And I must say that industry leaders are more civil now. I can recall the days, and you can too, because it's a few decades old perhaps, that people in corporations thought their one task was to maximize profits. It was their only mission, their only responsibility. Well, now, as you know, they're involved in civic activities. We still have arguments with them, obviously, but they're much better citizens than they once were.
Now, what about the whole ecology movement that I remember John Lovett I got to know quite well in Michigan Manufacturers. What do you want to do, fish or work? And then the problem in the labor movement, I was out on a recount out in the state of Washington, and the fellows that wanted good ecology, the Union of Lumbermen, or Woodwork, whatever they're called, raised some questions. How do you solve this problem of what you and I agree is sound ecology? You know, if Michigan still had forests, what shape we'd be in with the matter of jobs.
Yeah, and that's just about an irreconcilable conflict unless you can assure the workers of some guarantee of security. I'll give you another one. Iron mines out in Minnesota. No question they were polluting its wonderful Lake Superior. And it was obvious you had to do something about it, but it would mean closing down the mines. Now you're talking about losing thousands of jobs, impacting on thousands of families, and so you have this absolute irreconcilable conflict unless you can figure out a way to guarantee income security for those families that are affected. Now they did up in the Redwoods, incidentally. It was very expensive, but they were able to do it. You know, today there's this conflict in Oregon, and sometimes you run into situations where you have this conflict, and it's difficult to find a middle ground.
I think trees can be harvested so that you can, with effort, do that. But I don't know about iron ore mining. Can you keep that from polluting? I mean, it's
no, I don't think so. I think you have to do one or the other. You have to shut it down, or maybe with technology down the road you'll be able to do it, as we've done, with smokestacks. We've sort of greatly reduced the harm that they're doing. They're still polluting our environment, but we're making progress there. But it's very expensive. But if the choice is between the environment and losing jobs, you're in for a very, very difficult struggle.
It's the old story. If you're the woodcutter, there's one sequoia left, and your family's starving. What are you going, or freezing? What are you going to do?
Right.
So that's those are some problems.
Or trying to preserve the snail darts, or
right,
or the bird out in Oregon.
Spotted owl.
Spotted owl, yeah.
You want a spotted owl, or do you want to eat?
Yeah.
You can't eat the spotted owl.
The worker might say, well, give me a plate of spotted owl.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a very...
Yeah, sure did.
And I go back to that fellow, the Flint sit-down I saw that had his head cut open. Well, there's a very pragmatic, and would you agree generally the American worker is more pragmatic than ideological?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think we're less political, unfortunately, I think. But I can see the difference, forget about the European and their tradition and their history and their involvement in political parties. But I can see a difference between the United States and Canada.
Well, tell us more about that.
Well, probably because of their European heritage. We have a European heritage too, but maybe theirs is newer. But I don't like to say this, but Canada is a more caring, compassionate, sharing society than we are in the United States. I don't get any pleasure saying that, but I think that happens to be the case. And I believe that on that score, we've deteriorated in the last 12 years when, the gospel of greed and the mark of a successful person was how much economic wealth you could accumulate. And I think our standards were